Nothing is worse than ending a fight early due to some accidental mishap, but it's way worse when you feel the fight could have continued and the fighter possibly even milked a situation to end the fight prematurely. It's the worst, and that's what today's video is about.
Ref, what about the up kicks? And then pretends to, I don't know if he's...
The worst! I'm Jason from MMA On Point. A huge shout out to our Hall of Famers, and these are the 10 most suspicious fight endings in MMA history. And just so you guys know up front, I'm not merely looking at bad ref calls here. So you're not going to see anything like the Rumble eye poke loss. The suspicion isn't on Kevin Burns, it's on Steve Mazzagatti for such a bad call.
And there we're actually looking for fouls, you know, and I understand the fans are watching the fight. I'm personally looking for fouls.
Not saying the suspicion can't lay on both of them, but mainly the focus should be on the fighter acting suspicious or flopping, or at least being very questionable. So number 10, Sean O'Malley. What a better way to start off this list than with Mr. Sphere himself. And for this one, we're going to go deep into the past. Long before he ever earned a UFC title, he was in the amateur ranks way back in 2014. Sad to say for him, he'd just been finished in his last fight after being mauled on the ground and then tapped out. So this was supposed to be his rebound fight against Carlos Lozoya that was randomly a bantamweight title fight, despite him coming off of a loss. Because reasons, I guess, and well, yeah, clearly O'Malley had not figured out the ground defense part of his game yet, and it was looking like the last fight when this one got started. It was a bit back and forth. Sean did get a flash knockdown early on, but was also getting mauled through many parts of it. That's when suddenly in the third round, Lozoya suddenly gets a warning for shots to the back of the head. Okay, let's have a look at this. Oop, yeah, there's one. But wait, that one's illegal. Okay, a bit weird to stop the fight for literally one illegal shot, but things were about to get worse. So fast forward a bit and it makes it to the 5th and final round. O'Malley is still going for it and it's clear he's starting to gas, so Lozoya inevitably gets the takedown and starts gunning for the finish. Who turns over, it looks to be done, and Lozoya won, right? No, the ref ruled those 5 little pitter-patter shots as illegal, which it wasn't. For any of those skeptical, here is a very clear explanation of the rules from Big John McCarthy around this time period, so it's not a new rule or anything.
The back of the head is from the crown of the head, that's that little nodule that we all have somewhere in our skull, going straight down the back of the head, all the way down your spine. Easiest thing for you to do, target the ear. If you are touching an ear, such as that, that is not the back of the head.
So now let's look at those rule-breaking shots again. Just as Big John said, if you hit the ear, you're totally fine. And you can literally see those punches land on O'Malley's ear. But the ref gives him an out. So yes, this is a bad ref call, but where the suspicion goes to O'Malley is when he's asked if he can continue, he holds the back of his head nowhere near where he was getting hit, by the way, and he gets the win. Number 9, Bryan Battle versus Ange Losa. Alright, so this one, man is it weird. These two were facing off at UFC Vegas 88, so Bryan Battle was pretty much picking apart Ange Losa for 5 minutes when in the second, they had a bit of a head clash in an exchange. Battle pushes back Losa to continue fighting from the outside, and boom, an eye poke.
Yeah, I think a finger or thumb went straight there.
It's the first one of the fight, it's not great, but we've seen people get far worse, and after about a minute of looking at the eye, the fight suddenly gets called off, to which everyone, including the commentary, is livid.
There it is.
Oh,
Boom.
no.
Boom. Hit the eye, and it's over.
Oh, no.
The second you say you can't see, they're gonna stop the fight. That's not what you want to say if you want to keep fighting.
You don't say it.
Of course, none more so than Bryan Battle, who after the no contest was announced, begins mouthing off at Losa.
How? I was whooping your ass! I was whooping your ass!
And yeah, it basically just stops short of a brawl after this. So what's the issue here? Well, pretty much exactly what Bryan said. Losa was down bad and just wasn't having any luck, so Battle felt he wanted a way out. Do I agree with that? Well, there's no way for me to tell how bad that eye poke was. I'm not him. But Losa also wasn't showing too many signs of agitation to the eye. Didn't even seem really blink when the doctor was consulting with him. And well, the fact that he was so ready to fight after he supposedly couldn't continue adds a ton more speculation that he did in fact want out. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you agree with Battle and the commentary team on this one?
Right there, just a second ago, and looked at me like he wanted to fight. You're telling me you want to fight now, but you couldn't fight
fight a second ago.
He was winning, and I kind of agree with what he was saying. Where did all that energy come to finish the fight at the end?
Number 8, Reug versus Grishenko. Okay, this one is just funny. If you're not familiar with Umar Kane, or Reug as he's better known, he was pretty much hyped as the next big thing for heavyweights. For one, he was a Senegalese wrestling champion, so he had a legit background and trained really hard for a big MMA debut, in which he countered a Kimura, well, like this.
Oh my goodness me!
Yeah, that went viral in 2019, if you guys remember. If you were a fan on Twitter, you definitely saw this back then. And that also translated into his first couple one championship fights.
It's a pound away! Kalani, nowhere to go! Nowhere to go!
He's not defending his position, Michael.
And it's over. Reug goes 2-0.
And yeah, we were on the hype train as well when PT Kara wrote a hype video for us about him. He looked terrifying with his wrestling background and the way he used it. Sure enough though, his next fight didn't go as well. So when he was put against Kirill Grishenko in late 2021, everybody thought this would just be more of his domination on display. Instead, well, yeah, the inexperience reared its ugly head. For one, there was this whole first round where he was just not digging for underhooks, to the point that the commentary team couldn't help but point it out.
But he's not even swimming in. You can see he's not trying to pummel. He's not trying to reestablish an over-under. He's still got those overhooks, and he's trying to just stop the knees from coming in.
And it wasn't like he was getting dominated, but was definitely getting outstruck here. Finally, into the second round, he did start to have some success against the cage, even though there wasn't a ton of action, and suddenly, the very last second, this happened.
He's not doing a whole lot of work here. I would like to see the ref break them.
Okay, somewhat of a late shot landed for Kirill, but as you watched, they both fired a shot at the exact same time, so it wasn't just Kirill. Furthermore, the punch was already in motion before the bell sounded and the ref separated them. So it was very clearly unintentional, but what's humorous about this is what Reug does. He stops to point at Kirill and accuse him of punching his neck?
Khan was putting in his throat. I don't even think he hit his throat, unless something before the right hand hit him in the throat, but I don't know what.
The latency on that is, yeah, not right at all. Definitely a bit delayed. So upon review, the ref just ruled it as a loss because Reug refused to continue. Not exactly what he was hoping for.
Claiming, I believe, a shot after the bell in the second round that hit him in the throat.
No DQ, not even a no contest. Nope. He just lost the fight. Number 7, Todd Duffee versus Jeff Hughes. Classic heavyweights in this one. To break it down in the simplest of terms, this is basically a case of Todd Duffee Shane Carr-winning himself in a fight. He was dominating against a heavy underdog and Jeff Hughes, which makes sense because Jeff Hughes never won a single fight in the UFC after the Contender Series. And yeah, Duffee was destroying him for nearly the entirety of the first round, but pretty clearly gassed himself out. And just as fatigue was taking over and he was getting maybe even rocked here, there did appear to be a bit of an eye poke.
Oh yeah, there was a poke there. A poke and a push off. It wasn't that bad though, a poke. He poked him.
No big deal, right? Didn't look that bad. Todd wasn't even blinking or anything, but of course, this is where things get interesting. Time and again, Todd's answers to the ref was that he needed more time.
I think he said give him time. I think he said give him time.
And when the doc got called in due to him saying he was seeing double vision, well, that was the end of the fight. And this was one where the internet exploded into accusations of quitting and wanting out. It really didn't help that the tide was turning just as this was happening, and Duffee had just gotten rocked as it appeared just before this. The commentary team was super suspicious of this one.
Who am I to judge what a guy's feeling in that moment, but you know, it didn't look like he jammed too deep in the eye socket.
After the fight, Hughes did his best to be respectful, but also didn't really hold back at the same time.
I do not recall poking him in the eye. I didn't feel it. I didn't, I'm not calling him a liar.
Did you feel like he was just trying to get out of the fight at that point?
Yeah, it felt that way. Yeah, I didn't see him grab his eye or blink or anything, so I don't know.
If you ask me on this one, I just go with what Duffee said after the fight was called off to his corner. Number 6, Diego Sanchez versus Michel Pereira. Yeah, so this one is pretty much the opposite of the last one and infamous in the MMA community by now. Instead of Duffee having a ton of success all throughout the fight in the first round and gassing, inversely, Diego was just kind of getting picked apart for 3 rounds. I mean, that's what we all expected, right? When the fight was announced, this was pretty much everyone's reaction. And so in the third, when Michel Pereira was seemingly done playing with his food and finally started to actually go for the finish, he completely messed up and very clearly kneed Diego on the ground. 100% illegal and totally his fault. A point was being taken away, which was no doubt warranted. Where the suspicion came in was, well, on whether Diego could actually continue or not. It's hard to judge from the outside, but he did seem fine, and the doctor openly stated as such to Jason Herzog that he thought Diego was fine.
It would be a DQ.
And things escalated quickly as Diego outright asked if he would win if he couldn't continue.
Yep. Diego understands the rules.
Credit to Herzog for trying to avoid giving him a straight answer and focusing on whether he could continue and how he was feeling. But Diego was right. It would be ruled a DQ, and he got the win. No doubt about it, this was entirely Pereira's fault for the knee, but most thought Diego could continue, including the commentary and the doctor, and yeah, kind of an easy win in this case. Number 5, Markos versus Luana Pinheiro. So this one was back in 2020 at, oh wow, the Apex, shocker there. Anyhow, the fight was going pretty well for Pinheiro when the two ended up in a ground scramble, and Markos made the mistake of upkicking Luana while still on the ground. Obviously illegal. What makes this suspicious is, well, she reacts normally, even puts her hands behind her back to catch herself, and then suddenly appears to lose consciousness. And in their reaction to this, Paul Felder and Bisping on commentary immediately state their suspicion. She even looked at the ref and Markos as she fell back.
I think we're seeing a little bit of, what do you call it,
performance.
Bisping and Felder kind of went back and forth on it, and Felder tried not to be too harsh, but then also kind of making fun of it at the end as well.
I take back my statement.
No, wait. Hands back.
Oh, wait. Oh, I don't know.
There's some nice sound effects you got there, Paul.
Trying to remain impartial, but that's why it's suspicious. Even if she was winning to that point, it resulted in an instant win. She didn't have to continue fighting. She even asked the doctors if she lost. So yeah, you can make the argument for her if you like. I personally don't buy it. Number 4, Sakuraba versus Mesgar. The gist of this one is that it was the very first Pride Grand Prix, a seminal multi-night event that would galvanize the mixed martial arts world and kick off a legacy of incredible tournaments for the Japanese organization. And at this point in time, there was no bigger star than Kazushi Sakuraba in Japan. He was already a big pro wrestling star prior to MMA, and since winning the UFC Japan tournament and taking out several of the Gracies, I mean, it wasn't even close from a Japanese fan perspective on who the biggest star of this tournament was. And that's saying a lot considering the names involved. And there were some very key elements to this fight. Guy Mesgar, for one, had a broken foot and was offered this fight on just 2 weeks' notice. Not to mention he ended up getting sick before the fight too, so a rule was explicitly agreed to that he would accept the fight, but only under one condition, that it would be a single 15-minute round. That was the standard setup back then, and that meant no overtime rounds, which was also the standard back then, but they had agreed to none of that. This was especially important if he won and wanted to go to the next round of the tournament. He needed to be healthy, right? He just couldn't accept a fight otherwise and continue, so it was agreed to by all parties.
They called me up with 17 days notice to take a fight against Sakuraba. I said, listen, I'll take this fight, but I'm only doing 1 15-minute. And there was a bunch of other guys that had that same agreement. And so anyway, really what they did, they brought me over. They knew I wasn't training because of the injuries and stuff like that. And they wanted to, they wanted Sakuraba to, beat the former king of Pancrase.
Fast forward to the fight, and Guy Mesgar very clearly wins it. Sakuraba either had all of his takedown stuffed or reversed, and Mesgar dominated the striking on the feet, even the grappling exchanges as well. There was just no need for an overtime round here. It was a very clear decision for him, but instead, Pride, well, they called it a draw, and that meant, guess what? An overtime round was needed, the very thing that they agreed would not happen. Mesgar, being a Team Lions Den guy, Ken Shamrock, was there and was absolutely livid and began shouting at officials, telling Mesgar to leave in the process. So what did Pride do? They said that he lost the will to fight and gave Sakuraba the win. Man. Of course, the big irony here is that despite the decision being a complete BS one, it still did produce one of the most legendary fights ever, because Sakuraba went on in the tournament to fight Royce Gracie in a 90-minute fight that made Royce quit on the stool. Hashtag justice for Mesgar.
And so, they basically changed the rules right on the spot, man, and said, hey, we're doing another round. I'm like, no, we're not doing another round. And so, to be honest, it wasn't Ken who cost me that. It was the Pride shenanigans that cost me that fight.
Number 3, Pedro Nobre versus Alcantara. So, yeah, you're probably wondering, how do you top a legendary Pride scenario like the last one? But from here on out, all these get really, really blatant and a lot less questionable. Dare I say, rising above suspicion. Oh, Dan Miragliotta, one of the most experienced people in the sport. Guy used to be a judge way before you ever saw him reffing back in the dark ages of MMA.
Dan Miragliotta.
And in general, he's a pretty solid ref, but no idea what he was thinking here. This fight took place in 2013 on the infamous Belfort versus Bisping card.
I think he's a piece of shit, is what I think.
There was an immediate ball shot in this fight, which was fun, but other than that, seemed to be going fine. That's when, in the midst of a scramble and a close Kimura attempt from Alcantara, he ended up on Nobre's back and was landing some solid ground and pound. But, I wouldn't say there were huge shots or anything. And that's when suddenly Dan Miragliotta called timeout. Evidently some shots to the back of the head, and Nobre was almost entirely still here, not moving at all while holding the back of his head. Oh shit, that must have been a lot worse than I thought. Well, we watched the replay, and Kenny Florian immediately points out that all those shots should have been legal.
And I did not see one hit the back of the head. And not only that, these aren't hard shots, so I'm not sure what Nobre's complaining about here. I think there's some gamesmanship going on. I don't know. So I don't know where this shot is and why he's rubbing the back of his head like that.
Perfectly fine, hitting the ear. Meanwhile, Nobre is being questioned by the doctors and starts moaning. I don't know, dude. This is incredibly similar to the Sean O'Malley one, and the punches weren't even that big. Just like I pointed out with the O'Malley one, as long as it hits the ear, it is legal.
If you are touching an ear, such as that is not the back of the head.
I hate to have to say it, but I think this one is a total flop. The reason it ranks higher than the O'Malley one is because this isn't some random amateur fight and not some random referee in the middle of Montana. It's Dan Miragliotta, and the shots were much lighter in comparison. They certainly weren't fight-ending. It's a horrible call by the ref, and Nobre was definitely milking it. Ended up being a no contest, and Nobre was never brought back to the UFC as a result. Number 2, Azzy Thomas versus Mario Saeed. If you've been playing devil's advocate for a lot of these, this one is a lot harder to make a case for. This was for Cage Warriors back in 2014. It was just a prelim fight on the card, so no major implications in the fight or anything like that, but jumping straight to the controversial bit, this was nearly identical to the Luana Pinheiro Markos situation, but the difference, well, just watch.
I believe we're going to see the finish of the fight. Now that one clearly not legal.
If you weren't as suspicious as I was about someone catching themselves while falling back and glancing at the ref, this was on another level. Incredibly ridiculous. Dude full-on pleads with the ref about the illegal move before quote-unquote going unconscious. And the commentary with Josh Palmer did him no favors because, yeah, it was way too obvious.
It's an illegal upkick, but he turns and he says to the ref, what about the upkicks? And then pretends to, I don't know if he's...
And of course, Goddard just followed the rules and had to give it to Saeed, as it still stands as a win on his record to this day. All right, and number 1, Ed Herman versus Mike Rodriguez. Of all of these, this one is by far the worst, and there have been plenty of fake taps in this sport, which is a bit different of the scope of this video. But to make a comparison, this one is so much worse. And that's because there was so much time to stop it. Essentially, Ed Herman was getting dominated over the course of 2 rounds, rocked in the first with elbows, and getting destroyed to the body in the second. That's when a low blow landed. I didn't see it, but let's go ahead and check the replay. Dude, not even close. That's just a straight up body shot. And the commentary was pretty scathing about this one.
Ed Herman, you're my guy. I love your tough three in the house, but hey, listen, you got to do what you got to do.
That was nowhere close.
You know, look at soccer players. They do professional fouls.
Right.
Ed Herman's milking it, so what?
What kind of Academy Award are you giving to Ed Herman right now?
But guys, it actually gets worse. This was somehow not the end of the fight. It wasn't a no contest or a DQ. To make matters unnecessarily confusing, Mark Ratner explained the rule with the replays, and apparently, unless it was fight ending, the replay could not be used by the referee. By the way, this rule has since been changed. Thank God. Either way though, I have so many questions. How is that fight not ending as a result of that? And unbelievably, the fight continued with a visibly frustrated Mike Rodriguez. And to pour more controversy on top of this whole mess, Rodriguez ended up gassing himself out hunting for the finish again and got caught in a Kimura, which he then tapped to. Dude. What even was this fight? This was just the most blatant cheating and rule bending I've ever seen in my life. Since then, the replay rule has been updated, and you better believe Dana White went on one when it all concluded.
The worst I've ever seen. He's at fucking Mazzagatti level. That was one of the worst things I've ever seen. That kid wins by knockout and loses the fight. Just one of the worst things I've ever seen. All you gotta do is look at the fucking replay that's playing 6,000 times while Herman's on the ground and say, oh shit, I made a mistake.
So yeah, that one always gets my blood boiling a little bit. Anyhow, how did you guys feel about these fights? Was I too harsh on some of them? Are there better arguments for any of them? Or were they all as terrible as I thought they were? And I'm not saying literally every one of them was a flop for the record, but they certainly were suspicious, and from the top 5 down, I'm pretty bullish on them all being flops or screwy situations. And I need to ask you guys, are there others that you think should have been on this list? Definitely share below because I'm pretty sure everybody would be interested to watch those. And by the way, I don't see the Aljo Jan situation nearly as harshly as many other fans do. At any rate, I did see all of these as much worse, so it wouldn't have made the list anyway in my book. And of course, before I go, I gotta give a huge shout out to our Hall of Famers. You guys help this channel so much. Consider joining as well if you'd like to support the channel in a meaningful way and get the extra content as well. But that's it for me, guys. Peace out.